What's up, family? I would like to officially welcome you all to the RBG Centennial Conference, a virtual gathering of Africans both seen and unseen from all around the world. As we commemorate the 100-year anniversary of the red, black, and green, and we take this time to examine the past 100 years and to plot our course for the next 100 years, I'd like to take a moment just to look at the conditions of our people all around the world. We see today in places like Haiti, places on the African continent, that Africans are being armed and prepared to kill other Africans. We see today that African people representing the youngest population on the planet are being kept distracted, entertained, and confused as our enemies plot our starvation and our removal. It is my desire today, with these opening remarks, to leave a message on record for our posterity so that they may hear the words of Marcus Garvey and hear the words of our current generation. So the title of my remarks today will be Marcus Garvey as a Prophet of War. Think not that Marcus Garvey came to bring peace to the world, but a sword. While some may be troubled by this revelation, the truth has no need of defense. Garvey told us that he, like the great reformers before him, was sent to preach his doctrine only to suffer in his time for the doctrine to rise again and flourish like the green bay tree. Before Garvey arrived in America, he sent word that he had been given a mission from the Most High God. He described this God as a God of war, and he told his followers that just as God goes to war in defense of his rights, so too must man go to war in defense of his. As a prophet, Garvey was well aware that he would be punished for his teachings, but he was more than willing to pay the price. Garvey taught that even though the physical man dies, the righteous cause is bound to live. And where there is righteousness of spirit, there is length of life. It is for this reason that Garvey was falsely accused, imprisoned, and deported. We cannot allow this man to travel at large, disturbing the peace of the community. This man threatens the power of the state. Therefore, we must imprison him. We must place him out of the way so that he shall not teach these people this new doctrine. These were the words of Marcus Garvey, written 6 months before he was convicted and sentenced to prison. A word spoken will not go unheard. The call for the marshaling of African forces had gone out, after which Garvey boldly proclaimed, "My work has just begun, and when the history of my suffering is complete, then future generations will have in their hands the guide by which they shall know the sins of the 20th century. We shall wait patiently for 200 years if need be, to face our enemies through our posterity. Those of us who are here today, and those ancestors who are soon to return, are the posterity that Garvey was waiting for. Our marching orders are clear. Prepare yourselves for war, and know that the victory is ours to lose." As we gather today to commemorate the 100-year anniversary of the first International Convention of Negro Peoples of the World, I feel it is my duty to call attention to the Declaration of Rights, Articles 14, 15, and 16, which read as follows. "We believe in the inherent right of the Negro to possess himself of Africa, and that his possession of the same shall not be regarded as an infringement of any claim or purchase made by any race or nation. We strongly condemn the cupidity of those nations of the world who, by open aggression or secret schemes, have seized the territories and inexhaustible natural wealth of Africa, and we place on record our most solemn determination to reclaim the treasures and possession of the vast continent of our forefathers. We believe all men should live in peace one with the other, but when races and nations provoke the ire of other races and nations by attempting to infringe upon their rights, war becomes inevitable. and the attempt in any way to free oneself or protect one's rights or heritage becomes justifiable. If by chance this does not make it clear for you, then allow me to make it plain. The Declaration of Rights of the Negro Peoples of the World was a declaration of war, which we are all called to take part in. Our ancestors were under no false pretense when they signed this declaration and pledged their lives to defending it. Marcus Garvey, as a man of great vision, was abundantly clear. We, as African people, have been left with two choices, war or starvation. So we can either prepare ourselves for one or prepare ourselves for the other. Garvey never hid his intentions. His charge of redeeming the firstborn sons and daughters of this planet and reclaiming their stolen land was one given to him by the Creator. And as general in God's army, Garvey taught his followers that leadership means everything: pain, blood, and death. Garvey told us that any sane man, race, or nation that desires freedom must first of all think in terms of blood. Why even the Heavenly Father tells us that without the shedding of blood, there can be no remission of sins. Then how in the name of God, with history before us, do we expect to redeem Africa without preparing ourselves, some of us, to die? We cannot talk about sovereignty while allowing another race to lord the power of death over us, as if our lives are theirs to take. Sovereign consciousness tells us that power to take life is common to all men. But the question, as asked by Garvey, is where can we find the real men of our race? Men of character, men of purpose, men of confidence, men of faith, men who really know themselves. To know yourself is to know God, and to know God is to know sovereignty. So who are we as African people? Marcus Garvey said, if 400 million Negroes can only get to know themselves, know that in them is a sovereign power, is an authority that is absolute, then in the next 24 hours, we would have a new race. We would have a new nation, resurrected, not from the will of others to see us rise, but from our own determination to rise. Today, we as Black people are neither sovereign nor African. We've allowed others to speak for us for so long, it's no wonder we have no idea who we are. We are not workers. We are not the poor. We are not slaves or property. We are a great and noble people with great wealth that has been stolen from us. We are not underdeveloped. We are under attack. And our will to fight back has been stripped from us by taking on these identities that make us weak. Garvey said, let no voice but your own speak to you from the depths. Let no influence but your own raise you in times of peace and times of war. So who speaks for Africa today when we have a race of men who have grown comfortable in their cowardice and who would gladly take another man as their master? Garvey said, I have come across so many weaklings who profess to be leaders, and in the test, I have found them but the slaves of a nobler class. This is the type of leadership we have today all across the African world. A class of traitors, a class of thieves, a class of sellouts. Living under domination for so long has corrupted our character and diminished our will. Garvey said, for too long, our race has been without will and without purpose. Because of this, we have developed few men who are able to understand the strenuousness of the age we live in. The writing is on the wall. As the white nations of the world are becoming increasingly unstable, the period of ultranationalism and widespread political violence is rapidly approaching our doorsteps. Let us prepare today, for tomorrows in the lives of the nations will be so eventful that Negroes everywhere will be called upon to play their part in the survival of the fittest human group. This was Garvey's prophetic warning. Sovereignty or death. Garvey said, if you will but compare the possibilities of the future with the happenings of the past, you will come to the conclusion that there is no salvation for the Negro but through a free and independent Africa. He further stated, it can be plainly seen that in the question of self-preservation and self-interest, whites nowhere, whether in America, England, or France, are going to give way to the Negro to the detriment of their own. Said differently, the comfort of the white world is built on the subjugation and exploitation of Africa. If our survival was tied to the liberation of Africa, then there is no avoiding the conflict that Garvey promised would come. In this moment, as we collectively renew our commitment to freedom, it is important that we call on our ancestors to go before us and open the way. As we join together to prepare ourselves for battle, understand that this conference today is no ordinary event. It is a ritual, no different than the ritual performed by our ancestors at Boy Climate. We must draw strength from our ancestors. It is to them who we must call so that we may be made stronger by their presence. We must call on those ancestors who have given us the blueprint for African sovereignty. Kupete, Buleke, Dubu, Ibunu. These are the rallying cries of a sovereign people. We must call the names of those warrior ancestors. Zumbi dos Palmares from Brazil, Antonio Macio of Cuba, Gaspar Yunga of Mexico, La Mula Tracy Salitude of Guadeloupe, Nani of Jamaica, Deslings of Haiti, Didan Kamathi of Kenya, Winnie Mandela of South Africa, and Nat Turner of America. Most importantly, we must call on the name of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, the eminent prophet of war, who through the prophecy of his return revealed the true nature of his being. Garvey prophesied, my enemies think that I am defeated, but I tell you, the world shall hear from my principles even 2,000 years hence. I am willing to wait on time for my satisfaction and retribution of my enemies. Observe my enemies and their children and posterity, and one day you shall see retribution settling around them. Look for me in the whirlwind of the storm. I shall come and bring with me countless millions of black slaves who have died in America and the West Indies and the millions of Africa to aid you in your fight for liberty, freedom, and life. And be assured that if it takes 1,000,000 years, the sins of our enemies shall visit the 1,000,000th generation of those that hinder and oppress us. The day of retribution is now. We as Africans must know ourselves, and we must know our enemy. Study the European, who will fight to hold on to all he has stolen by any means necessary. Meditate on the words of one of the greatest enemies of the African race, Cecil Rhodes, who called for the creation of a secret society to dispossess Africans of their land. And I quote, why should we not form a secret society with but one object? The furtherance of British Empire and the bringing of the whole world under British rule, and for making the Anglo-Saxon race but one empire. We must study the strategies and tactics of warfare used by our ancestors, such as the ikumeku, which scholars have interpreted as do not talk about it or do not reveal it. The meaning of ekumeku is something invisible but devastating and uncontrollable, like a whirlwind. In the age of African liberation, we must acquaint ourselves with the eye of the storm. Examine the characteristics of a whirlwind. They uproot structures, destroy crops, and raze whole villages. This must be the nature of our struggle. If you're in need of a prophet, then let it be Marcus Garvey. If you must pray, then let it be to the gods of your ancestors. And if you ask them for anything, let it be the courage to fight and the courage to die in pursuit of our victory. In closing, I leave you with the warrior's oath that was taken by the most fierce African freedom fighters of the 20th century. I speak the truth and vow before God and before this movement, the movement of unity, the unity which is put to the test, the unity that is mocked with the name of Mau Mau, that I shall go forward to fight for the lands that our ancestors cultivated, the lands which were taken by the Europeans. And if I fail to do this, may this oath kill me, may this seven kill me, may this me kill me. Ashe.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't know you was gonna play the whole thing.
Hey man, we just have to, it's a powerful speech, man. I thought it was important to play it out, But I definitely was activated while listening to the speech, man. So really appreciate, you putting the conference together,
Mm-hmm.
and that speech was definitely activating. So we had to fit it in today.
No, I appreciate that, brother. And I think that's kind of like been the feedback that I've gotten from everyone. There was just so much that I learned just in the process of working with the team to organize this conference. That speech was not planned, and when we were getting down to like the last week, probably like 4 days out before the conference, because you remember I hit you up. I guess it was 4 days before the conference. I was like, yo, I need a drummer. I don't know if it was you or brother Farugh who I hit up.
It was me.
It was you. Okay, so I was like, this what happened was when we was wrapping up the previous week, once we kind of like had all of the assets, like the pre-recordings and everything compiled together, he was like, brother Frank, my brother who's behind the scenes, is like, well, what are you going to do for introduction? And like when you in organizer mode, you're not really thinking about being a part of the event. You thinking about getting everybody and pulling them in, like, but you're not thinking about speaking at all. Like I didn't. Initially, I wasn't even supposed to be seen except for the second day. I was going to give a short presentation that was along the lines of the theme. But he was like, "Nah, you can't just go in front of your camera and give like a random kind of like off the cuff opening." He was like, "You gotta write some remarks, and you have to get a videographer to record them because this moment is too special for you to just wing it." So he put like some significant pressure on me, and everything was just like really crazy because I'm still in the midst of like planning and organizing the event. But now we only got like 3 or 4 days before start date, so I have to reach out to this videographer brother to set a date. So he's like, listen, I can come and meet you on Tuesday. So then I was like, all right, bet that'll work, but like we need some drummers too because we want to kind of like capture the whole ambiance. So I reached out to y'all, and y'all was able to come through, but everything just went like crazy because I knew I had to give the speech on Tuesday. So Monday I started writing it, and I was up to like 4 o'clock in the morning writing the speech. And then like I went to sleep. I woke up around 10. I got on a work meeting. I was on that meeting until like 11:30, and then the storm knocked out all the power. Right. So I'm like, all right, cool. The power, and mind you, the speech isn't done. The speech, I probably got like 60, maybe 70% of it written. But like, I know I got to go down to Philly later in the afternoon to meet the brother so that he can record me giving the speech. So 11 o'clock come, the storm come, and I feel good about the storm because I'm in the midst of everything happening, and from just the spiritual aspects of like this tornado that's happening, and we're in the middle of this thing that we're referring to as like the week of return. So I'm looking at this tornado that's happening. I'm like, yeah, the ancestors, the energy is definitely here, and I feel it, and I felt like great about all the energy that was around it. But then the power gets knocked out at the crib, and we check with the power company, and they like, well, the power's not going to be back on until like 11 o'clock tonight.
Wow.
And then it's like, it puts me in a bind because I'm like, yo, I got to meet this brother to record it. But the part that I've written so far is on my desktop, and I don't have any way to access it. So like, long story short, I reached out to Dr. Asante, like, Doc, we got these brothers coming in. We've already paid them to come record us today. So I took my whole desktop, my monitor, my mouse, my computer, just ran down to the institute. I get to the institute at like 3 o'clock, finish writing the speech at 4:55. The brother shows up at 5. I get to read it over one time, and then he's like, "All right, you got to give it." And I'm like, "All right." So like that's how it all like came together. And I honestly I thank my brother Frank for having the vision to say that's what needed to be done in that moment, because he made me sit down. He pulled me out of organizer mode and put me back in the mode of what was needed. And he's saying what is needed is a message to set the tone for what this entire event is supposed to mean. So when I was thinking about that, I said the message that I want to give is I want to give a message that if it's heard today, if it's heard 10 years from now, 50 years from now, or 100 years from now, it can activate that warrior spirit and prepare people to fight. So that's the message that I wanted to give. So I'm reading through philosophies and opinions, and I'm like, well, where do I want to come from? And the first thing that popped in my mind was God as a warlord. That's what Garvey wrote. Garvey wrote an essay called God as a Warlord. And I read through it and I was just thinking, and I was like, I got it. Marcus Garvey as a prophet of war. And once that came to my head, everything else just started like flowing. And I was able, it was just like kind of like pouring out of me. So like 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, all right, I'm almost there, but it ain't done yet. But I'm almost there. And it's just like, I just give thanks that we was able to get it done.
That's right. We have here with you Brother Omowale, the organizer. We opened up listening to the opening remarks of the RBG Centennial Conference that happened this past weekend. Myself, Brother Oba, and Farugh had an opportunity to contribute to this, conference that was absolutely awesome. This is, so we just jumped right into it, but we want to welcome everyone for joining us again for another edition of Sonic Ngoma, brought to you by Urban Shamans Production, Be Maat, in Do the Knowledge Radio. And we once again, peace, brothers. What's going on?
What's going on, brother? What's happening? I'm good. I'm blacktastic. I'm blacknificent. I'm just ready to rock and roll this week. So it's great to have my brother Omowale Afrika in the house.
Indeed. I know you heard the drums in the background. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to the opening remarks. What you think? What you think about that presentation?
Yo, I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I was inspired. It just made me reflect on the first time I met him. The first time I met him, he was the president of the UNIA Division 121. And I was currently assistant minister for the Temple of the Black Messiah at the time. And we was there for a meeting, general meeting, and I knew the brother was special. So I just seen the growth from there to that presentation, and I'm just like, wow, like that's some serious growth, bro. And it took a moment because I've been a member of the UNIA for, wow, I can't even remember. But I've been a dues paying member, not an active member, but definitely a dues paying member. But I remember reading the Declaration of the Rights of the Negro People of the World, and being blown away by it. And so when you was reading from that, I had to search it out and find it myself, find my copy, and it just when you talking about activating a warrior spirit, it's I need to recommit myself to UNIA, and I'm going to do that. And I just really thank you for bringing Marcus Garvey's message to the present reality, and that is still relevant. It's still relevant, and I'm just grateful for the production that you put on. I remember just, anytime Oba brings somebody on that I'm not really familiar with, I do this 24, 48-hour mass researching, viewing interviews and lectures and workshops and things like that, just to understand the person. And I have 3 critical questions for you. And then in that research, I heard you say that in the beginning, there was 12 people that started organizing. And by the end of it, it was over 80 people. How did that happen? Like,
So the planning team at the beginning, internal to AI Philly, there were 10 people, right? 5 men, 5 women. And then there were 2 additional that were external to AI Philly, but they were people who I had relationships with, who I knew we would need in order for this to be successful. So I reached out to them and I was like, both a brother and a sister. So that's what made it, 6 men and 6 women. And I reached out and was like, listen, we don't have a budget. Like, we can't afford to pay you to do this event. But let me tell you what this event means. Let me explain to you what the significance of this is and what you would be contributing to. And after that conversation, like, my man Frank was like, listen, bro, if I'm in for, he said, if I'm in for a penny, I'm in for a pound. Like, don't worry about paying me. What do you need? And the same with the sis, my sister Jama Wuyar. Not only does she come in and consult and advise on what the strategy should be for marketing it, social media, she said, you know what? In addition to that, I'm going to speak at the event. I'm going to be a moderator at the event. But oh, by the way, here's some money because I'm also going to be a sponsor of the event.
Wow.
So it was like, that was like the energy. Like, when people, when they understood the vision, that was it. So, okay, now we got this team of 12, this core team who's all bought into the vision. Now we have to expose the vision to the public and do a call for proposals and a call for speakers to get involved. So we put that call out, I think it was like the last week of June. And because we really only had like a 4-week planning window, we put it out in the last week of June. We told people that their proposals had to be in by the 3rd of July. And like in 1 week, we got more than 50 proposals, right? So that was just for like our breakout session presenters. That didn't even account for the people who were speaking in the main room, the panelists in the main room, or the moderators in the main room. So collectively, and if I was to add the volunteers who helped as technical moderators, collectively we were essentially coordinating about 100 people. And it's like the way that the different connections and the relationships happen. It was like, these are people who I couldn't touch myself, right? But because I had relationships with people who had relationships, then I could say, hey, I have this thing going on. Do you think this brother would be interested? And then they'd be like, no, I got you. Like, he's in. I'm gonna call him and tell him he's in. It was like that kind of thing, and I was like, and it just all worked out, and pretty much everybody like kept their word. And so that's how it went from 12 to 86 basically. And it coordinating among all these people, especially our people,
yeah, that's
in a 4-week time span, it was just like, all right, we got this under control. We have the team to pull it off. And the folks who we had behind the scenes were pushing us to make this something more than anybody's expectations. We wanted to really just like show folks that this is just not going to be a Zoom meeting. This is going to be something that is going to be memorable. It's going to be something that we won't understand the impact of until several years. Perhaps we'll never realize it, because you never know when things will get picked up or when they'll find their way into the whirlwind, so to speak, right?
Absolutely.
You put it out there, and that's why I said about Garvey's remarks, I said that a word spoken will not go unheard, because Garvey put it out there, and we didn't know when those words would be kind of picked up and acted on, but he put it out there knowing that eventually it would, which is why he said, my enemies think I'm defeated, but little do they know my return is assured. Oh, and by the way, when I do return, I'm bringing that work with me. I'm bringing all the ancestors who died in the West Indies and the Americas, and those who were slaughtered on the continent. And when we come back, we come in to raise hell on all the people who oppress African people across the globe. Right? So he was very assured of what he was doing. So when I picked up on that, I said, that's the message that people need to hear right now. People don't need nothing watery. They don't need nothing weak. They need to understand strength. They need to understand power. And that's what Garvey referred to as sovereignty. He said, get to know that sovereign thing within inside of you. And when you get to know what that thing is, that's when you'll know yourself, and that's when you'll act from that perspective. So when I was speaking, that's the perspective that I was speaking from.
Brother, you and I, the last couple of weeks, in particular, I mean, all of us, all four of us have been really caught up in the whirlwind, but I know specifically you and I, you know, with the African Coalition, with doing African Independence Day, and then the RBG Centennial, and now this week coming up, the 100th year anniversary, or the 100 years in Whirlwind Conference, and then on Sunday, Pan-African Liberation Movement in Baltimore, Tubman City will be having their Race First rally. Brother, shout outs to Brother Imhotep Fatiu. It's been crazy, but my question to you is: you mentioned AI, you mentioned Afrocentricity International. Can you elaborate for our listening audience? What is Afrocentricity International? How long have you been affiliated with it? And what is the purpose of the organization that organized such a brilliant and dynamic conference this past weekend?
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to just give honor and credit to Dr. Mozama, the Parat and founder of Afrocentricity International, or Parat and co-founder of Afrocentricity International, for just empowering me and trusting me to even to do this, because this is something that was truly an organizational effort. And she allowed me to use the resources, you know, of the organization and the name of the organization in order to pull this off. But AI is an organization that was created in 2011. It was co-founded by Dr. Molefe Kete and Dr. Mozama, to serve as an international organization that could do the work that Marcus Garvey envisioned would be done through the UNIA. It's an organization that works across 4 different axes. So it works across political, economic, intellectual, and spiritual, right? But African spirituality is the bedrock of the organization, right? Dr. Mazamba is a Mambo. She was ordained in 2002. I've actually traveled to Haiti with her to experience and be immersed, you know, in the culture of voodoo, to experience it for myself. But she's the you know, she's like the fearless leader and founder of this organization that has like set the direction for where it is going. She is Garveyite through and through, but she recognized that in order for Garvey to be in order for Garveyism to reach its most in order for it to be truly sharpened, it had to be clear, it had to be grounded, and it had to be centered. And what I mean by that is it had to come from an African center or an Afrocentric perspective. So what Afrocentricity International gives to Garveyism is it gives to Garveyism a centeredness in our own values, our own interests, and our own perspectives. Right? There's not much that you can critique about Garveyism or the aims and the objectives of the UNIA, but we also know that the organization and the philosophy was a product of its time. So as a result, like when you look at like the aims and the objectives, much of the early Pan-Africanist movement had this like civilizationist concept where one of their goals was to so-called civilize like the backward tribes of Africa. So it was this very the way that we viewed Africa and the way that we viewed self was off center. It was a bit dislocated. So what Afrocentricity as a philosophy and or a theory gives to Garveyism is it gives us a grounded worldview so that we have a better lens to be more precise in the way we go about achieving Garvey's vision of a free and redeemed Africa and a free and redeemed African people. So that's AI in a nutshell. It's a child of the UNIA, right? Because it's a child of Garvey, right? So it's and I always say, when people talk to me about my experience in the UNIA, one of the lessons, and I think it might have been Brother Malik who transitioned back in, I believe, 2017 or 2018, he may have transitioned. But one of the things he used to say, because he used to give me a very hard time because I was a young person, but he always wanted to make sure young people in the UNIA understood the Constitution and wasn't just kind of like flying by like the seat of our pants. But one of the things I learned from him is that there are two types of people in the UNIA. You have members who are in the UNIA and you have members who have the UNIA in them. And he would say that whoever the members who have the UNIA in them, they can be anywhere and do the work of the UNIA, right? So as you know, Brother Farugh mentioned, I was inaugurated as president of Division 121 back in January of 2017. But my tenure there as president was it was not long. By the High Executive Council of that year, I was forced to step down for internal reasons that related to I mean, I think it's all out in the open now, and at this point, just related to the building. I was trying my best to defend the building on behalf of the membership and based upon the Constitution. And I think that there were like lots of different conflicts of interest, and my principles wouldn't allow me to compromise and to be used in a manner against my city, against the members of 121. And because I took a principled stand, I was asked to step down, which was it was what it was. But by the end of that year, by December of 2017, that's when I became a member of AI.
I remember that distinctly for me because, like I said, I remember meeting you at the hall, at Thomas W. Harvey Division 121. I remember meeting you there, and definitely knowing and understanding that you had my full support at that time. I understand what you were striving to do as a young president of that particular division. Which I also am a member of as well, proud member of the UNIA-ACL Division 121. But I'm going to ask you an interesting question. What does the UNIA-ACL and what does the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey in the season of Garvey, in the season of Black August, the month of resistance, what does the UNIA and what does the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey mean to you personally?
Wow. I mean, Garvey for me really means everything in terms of his analysis, his perspective, his example. When you talk about African leadership, right, and having a vision for a global people, and being moved based upon a love for a global people, there is no greater exemplar than the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, right? So naturally, his legacy is that of the UNIA and ACL. So therefore, if you have an affinity for Garvey, by extension, it also means that you have an affinity for the organization that he founded and also led. But that doesn't mean that either Garvey or the organization is without its own, challenges or even contradictions, right? Because we all have those things. So I think that when you look at like the UNIA and ACL today, I would say that it's reflective of the state of our people. Without getting into too much of like the internal politics, but just like the overall fragmentation, factionalism. Okay, I hate the word. The fragmentation and factions and the egotism that we see overriding our community is highly prevalent, in the UNIA as it exists today. And it's one of the reasons why, you have multiple UNIAs, which is like, a house divided cannot stand. So I think that where we are in this moment, our generation needs to be somewhere where the work can be done and we are not imprisoned by like the baggage of the past. because like trying to sort through some of these old beefs and conflicts, and yeah, I mean, you're still going to run into them wherever you go.
Right.
You know, somebody asked me, you know, people kept asking me like, you know, how do I feel about pulling off such a successful event? And the three words that I responded to everybody with was not without struggle. And what I mean by that is like just to try to pull it off, there's struggle internal, there's struggle external. So none of this is like a cakewalk.
That's
You're
right.
gonna face struggle, you're gonna face resistance, and sometimes you're gonna face it from people that you think you shouldn't even be facing it from. But it's gonna be there and you have to deal with it. And I think that my experience at the UNIA at such a young age allowed me to go through, really to take those licks and those wounds, and to mature, and to be, you know, more effective as a leader and trying to navigate, you know, difficult situations when you recognize that that kind of like comes with the work, you know. So one of I don't want to over talk because I can keep talking, so I apologize for that. I'll let y'all ask the next question.
Hey man, just let it flow, man. I'm sure you have a lot to express. I know what it feels like coming, coming off a powerful driven conference that was really incrementally instrumentally involved in. But I mean, I was thoroughly impressed with the effort and the way it was presented. Um, and I feel like you set the bar. The bar was set high for virtual organizing, and a lot of times we look at COVID happening as it pretty much set us back, but it actually propelled us forward. To really utilize this medium and various different mediums to connect with our people, and not just locally but globally. And that's the kind of edge that we need to broaden our message, to reach our people. We are living in such a technological age where we have the access, so now we are forced to utilize the technology. And I just think so far from what I've seen from this sort of level of organizing, this was a very high level presentation that you put together, that you all put together, should I say.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely a team effort. Like there were no insignificant contributions. There were no insignificant people at the table. There were no big I's and little U's. Just I've been organizing for a while now, and I think that when you organize for so long, you pick up just lessons and wisdom along the way. So one of the things is like organizing is a team sport. And also like with anything, you have to navigate different people and different personalities, so you have to know how to work with them because you're going to run into difficult personalities. But if that person is a resource, you have to figure out a way to work with them or work through them so that the work can still get done
That's right.
despite of their attitude or their ego or
That's
whatever,
it.
you know what I mean? So one of the things I picked up when I was in college, and I don't know who gave me this lesson, but it was that you can get a lot done as long as you're not tripping over who gets credit.
Right.
Right? You can make some powerful stuff happen as long as people feel like see, what happens is a lot of us try to center ourselves in the effort because so the model that the UNIA was erected using, the UNIA was erected using a kind of charismatic messianic model, right? So like a preacher model. So the fact that many of us come from the church or come from that background, a lot of us lean real heavy towards like this notion of like a Messiah. So many of the workers in our community, I don't want to say the workers, but a lot of the personalities in our community have this Messiah complex. And I think that when you have that, it doesn't allow you to work in the trenches. It doesn't allow you to work kind of like in the ranks because you need to be the one that's like out in the front. You need everybody to know that I did this, and I'm the person that has been sent by the ancestors to save our race. You understand what I'm saying? And
Yep.
that type of thinking and that type of personality has been so detrimental to our movement and to our efforts. That and the fact that we haven't had the ability to effectively resolve conflict, right? Because it's like when you're building, especially when you're trying to build something like a nation or a government, you have to account for the fact that there's going to be friction. But the important thing is that when the friction comes, because it will, how do you resolve it in a manner so that you can stay unified and continue to build? But what has happened in our movement is that it has almost operated like a cancer. You get this cell that keeps splitting and splitting and splitting and splitting into all these little cells, and to the point that the body can't effectively do what it's meant to do because it has this huge cancer inside of it now. It's got all these splits. So what I'm trying to do is I never want to center myself. I always want to empower the people who are around me, and I want to center what we've been able to do collectively, because it's not about any individual. And when it becomes about an individual, that's when kind of like the movement work dies with the individual. But if you can empower the people around you, even if you get taken up out of here, then they know they got to pick up your sword and carry on the fight. Right? That's how they honor you, by picking up your sword and picking up your gun and keeping it moving. But if you have a situation where you are making people diminish themselves because you're challenged by their talent and your ego is like, insecure around other men who are strong or around women who are also strong, then I don't think you're fit to lead in this environment. And I think that the new type of leadership that we need is, like Baba Baruti said, we need leadership that has dirt under their fingernails, that's willing to get into the trenches, get into the mud, and willing to, say what you want about Christianity, but there's some wisdom in there when they talk about, the servant should be the least of them. You know what I mean? Take the example, like whoever's going to lead, that person should be the humblest and willing to do the nastiest of the work. You understand what I'm saying? So that's why Garvey always ended all of his essays and his letters in "your humble servant," because he recognized that he was a servant of the people and that the people were not there to serve him. And I think that somewhere along the line, we got it mixed up, and we started to, do this thing where it's like, I'm here for y'all to worship me. You don't see all this talent and all these PhDs and all these things I got. I could go get all this money from the white man, but no, I'm bringing it to y'all. So y'all Negroes should be happy that I'm here giving you my talent. Like, I think that that's been the attitude. And I think that because that's been the attitude, it hasn't allowed us to properly grow or form or cultivate new leadership.
Yeah, I think you said a lot of things. Talking to different people, a lot of people think, oh, there is a lack of leaders, and I said I don't see that. But and you made a great point. People have this messianic perception of who is the leader, and I'm saying I see plenty of leaders in my community. You know what I'm saying, far and wide, and the way we perceive what a leader is very distorted. It's very outdated. It's very limited. And so the analogies that you gave, man, it was really on point. I absolutely agree wholeheartedly. We have to begin to think about leadership in a different way. We have to apply ourselves in a different way. We need to do away with the old adage of what is perceived to be leadership. And really, you know what I'm saying, mostly the people who are making things happen, and those are really your leaders. The people you don't see, the people who are pushing the movement, you know what I'm saying, those are your leaders.
Yeah, no, true indeed. Mama Marimba said that we need to problematize this notion of leadership because the race needs workers. We don't need leaders. We need people willing to do the work, because many hands, makes the load lighter.
That's
So
right.
like if you're a leader, then show me your work. You understand what I'm saying? We don't need to see your words. We don't, lecturing and all of that is cool, is necessary, because you have to build up the character, you have to build up the conscience, and you have to politicize people. So that's necessary. You got to do that part. But that without the work is incomplete. You're not whole. You're not balanced. So if you're going to do that part, you have to have the work equally. You know what I mean? So, and we got to balance it out, and we got to, you know, and that's why I prefer work over this notion of leadership, because what people can do is you can play dress up like a leader. You can kind of, you know, talk with a certain inflection. You can wear a certain style of dress, and people will look at you and be like, that's a leader right there, because you somehow, I guess, you look like a leader. So it's like work isn't fashionable, but like people can play like they actually do work, and they can get out here and they can preach and they can tour and do all these things. But I think that what's needed more than anything right now is people who are willing to work and sacrifice without even being seen. And the reason why this event was so successful is because although that I was the person that was running around talking, there were 11 people beside me that were working as just as hard, and they weren't seen. And none of us cared who got the credit. If it was a situation where people was like, oh, everybody gonna think Brother Omowale is the one who did this thing, then you'll get people beside you just like, yeah, well, then I'm not gonna help. They're gonna start trying to sabotage and things like that. But if you got people beside you and none of us cares who gets the credit, then we can do something magical together, because it's not about any individual one person. It's about what we're collectively building. And at the end of the day, we can all look back at that, you know, this particular conference we were able to pull off together and say, yo, together we just did something special, and it would not have been possible without every contribution that was brought to the table.
Well, of all the profound things you have said thus far, one of the things that stood out to me is the you don't have to be in the UNA to do the UNIA work. So I really appreciate that, because that was the challenge for me. Because I seen some of the internal conflict that was going on with the UNIA, and I could go into detail, but I refuse to do so. And so that was the conflict. I don't want to go back into that. So I will continue to contribute financially. I will continue to, when they ask me to do things, I will do it. But I don't have to engage in that environment, because I'm not at my best in that kind of environment.
Yeah. Can I read something here from Garvey?
Yes.
Absolutely.
All right. So
when you learn what's not good for you, you don't want to participate in it. You know what I mean? It's like, if I can't operate at my best, why put myself in that situation? You know what I mean? So.
all right, I'm going to read this here. It says, as Negroes, no one suffers from the infliction of injustice more than we do. It is practiced against us in every walk of life, politically, socially, industrially, educationally, commercially, judicially, and even religiously. For 300 years, the Negro has cried out against the crime of injustice, and he is no nearer being heard today on his own account than when he first raised his voice. In the general order of things, the weak suffers most from the crime of injustice. The strong man, the strong man will be unjust to the weak, and the strong nation will, in like manner, oppress the less fortunate. The whole situation, it seems, therefore, hangs on the developed strength of the individual, race, or nation. It is the realization of this that causes the Universal Negro Improvement Association to preach the propaganda of coming together among Negroes. If we must have justice, we must be strong. If we must be strong, we must come together. If we must come together, we can only do so through the system of organization. So, well, I think that what Garvey is saying there is incredibly profound, and I think that that was the reason why he created the UNIA, because he recognized that as a people we lack strength and we lack power, and that we were wasting a lot of our strength and power by agitating and begging white people for justice, instead of us developing the strength and the power to get justice on our own, to make it so that injustice could not be done to us. So what he argued was that the way that we do that is through organization. So he gave us the model The model was the UNIA. But just like when Henry Ford came, back in 1920 and he gave you the Model T, it doesn't mean you have to stay with the Model T. If you find an organization that has the same mechanics, the same values, the same perspectives, then become a part of that organization, because we can't achieve that power that Garvey is referring to without organization. So it doesn't have to be the UNIA. I'll never, ever, ever talk bad about the UNIA. But what I'm saying is that it can't be done us individually. We have to find somewhere that we can bring our talent to, our resources to, our spirit to, so that we can work collectively, right? Because he said the whole mission of the UNIA was what? Us coming together, right? So the UNIA is not the only vehicle that can bring us together. There are other vehicles out here, and there are new vehicles that can be created. But what's important is us coming together. So that's why when we were convening this conference, there were people that I was reaching out to that maybe ideologically I didn't rock with them. They weren't on anything flagrant, like I wasn't going to bring the alphabets in and nothing like that, but maybe they leaned in a way to the left or to the right in a way that I'm like, they're not quite exact. They're not where I am, but that wasn't where I was at with it. I wasn't on some Christian like type church stuff. So we was reaching out to people who were showing that they were doing the work. So I don't care where you were doing the work. I don't care what organization you were doing the work with. If we saw that you were doing work, you got an invitation. So I told when me and brother Oba, when we spoke, I guess that was probably like a week and a half before the event started. I said, brother Oba, if you look, there aren't any preachers on the bill.
Right.
There aren't no big I's and little U's on the bill. Everybody that's on the bill is there because they've shown themselves to be workers. Because that's what we need. We need unity so that we can better coordinate our efforts and better coordinate the resources that we're using to achieve our goals. Okay.
Yeah, this is awesome. It's interesting. Your baby shows up at this time. They stay always on time. We're actually at the 3-minute mark to closing hour. Any last remarks you want to share with our listening audience?
Can I ask one last question real quick? Been to a lot of different conferences. This is probably one of the most phenomenal conferences. My question to you is that when we have conferences on the level in which we had this past weekend, and we're talking about the type of dialogue around Garvey, around the 100-year commemoration, we usually tend to get a battery charge. We tend to walk away feeling good. And one of the things that I dislike about conferences is that we have a feel good, but then there's nothing tangible that comes out of conferences. I've been to a number of them where that has not happened. I've been to some that work has been done after the conference. So my thing is that what do you see coming out of what happened this weekend? What happened with this 2-day event? What do you see coming out of it as far as the aftermath of what just took place?
Yeah, so that was actually planned even going into the event, right? So when we convened this event, if you were one of the people who received the convening letter, we convened it under the umbrella of the Global Commission for African Sovereignty. And the event, the full name of it was the RBG Centennial Conference and the Sovereign Accord for the Development of a Global African State. So that latter piece, right, the Sovereign Accord for the Development of a Global African State, is something, if you were there on day 2 of the conference, I kind of like spoke during my presentation as to what that entailed and what we were trying to create. Because what we were saying is this is an event for us to come back together, to recommit ourselves to freedom, to liberation, and to fighting for our sovereignty, and to picking up from where our ancestors left off, right? So the task that we've been charged with is the creation of a global African state. Garvey referred to it as a super state, right? And it has to be on the African continent. Now, we've gotten away from that, but this event was to once again center us on Garveyism and on nation building. So now that we're leaving out of the conference and we have this commission, the Global Commission for a Sovereign African State, we're reaching out to folks to say, hey, the next step is to actually doing the work. Now, when we were reaching out to people to just give them a platform to speak, everybody's going to say yes to that. But the good thing is that when you call a room of 100 people, 20 of those people are going to be workers. So right now we're in the process of trying to identify that 20 so that we can move forward and continue to coordinate efforts, right? Because this isn't about AI. AI is just one vehicle in the formation. But in order to have a movement, right, you need multiple vehicles in the formation, right? So AI and whatever other organizations in the community that can work side by side and not make it about an ego thing or we're in type of competition with you, because I don't understand why we always feel like we competing with each other when we're supposed to be working. I understand.
Right.
It goes back to like we want to be the one who gets the credit.
Right.
So if you are being too effective at what you're doing, I have to slow you down, because then people are going to start looking at you and your organization like, oh well, that's the one. But that's not what it's about. So long story short, the next step is this sovereign accord for the development of a global African state. I spoke about that in detail, but that work is already underway. So we'll be reaching out to people at the conference to say, hey, Brother Oba, Brother Khamuo, help me say your name, brother. Is it
Khamuo.
Khamuo? Brother Khamuo, Brother Farugh, if y'all want to come get down, we're looking for good brothers to come and build with us so that we can continue to go forward. So that's where we at right now. Like the conference was not an event. The conference was a ritual, and I said that in the opening, that this is a ritual no different than the ritual of Boy Kaimen, because we have to ritualize our liberation and we have to ritualize our sovereignty. So the conference was just the first act. After the conference is where the fight starts. So that's where we are.
All right. Where could we get in contact with you? How could you be reached in the organization?
So you can always contact me through AI Philly. So on Facebook, I think we're AI Philadelphia. On BB Toomey, we're at Afrocentricity International. On Twitter, Instagram, I think we're AI_Philly. So if you just check with AI, you'll definitely be able to get in contact with me.
All right, thank you, man. I want to just extend my gratitude and appreciation for all that you did. I appreciate you offering, welcoming me as a drummer to participate with this conference and the opening remarks, which I felt was very powerful position. And I'm glad to have you on here. And we definitely, I can say for myself personally, man, don't hesitate to reach out. You know what I'm saying? And this won't be the last time. Hopefully you'll be on this show.
Absolutely. I mean, we right in the city together, so definitely. All right.
Hey, brother. I share the same sentiments, and I'll see you this weekend. We do it again. 100 years in a whirlwind. Matter of fact,
yeah, I'm presenting on Sunday, but I'll be presenting from the beach. But
I'm presenting on Sunday too. And here's the thing: we're presenting at the same time.
I saw that I think it's me, you, and Dr. Maat. So it'll be good. It'll be good.
You'll be real good.
I wanted my final words would be a wise person said that wisdom equals contribution. So all the wisdom that you shared today, it's definitely real because it's backed by contribution. So I appreciate you, brother.
All right.
I appreciate you too, brother Farugh.
All right. So we're going to close out the show. You all can get in contact with us at AfricanIndependenceDay.org, AfricanIndependenceDay@gmail.com. All right. You can hit up our Facebook 16th Annual African Independence Day on Facebook. You can also contact us through our business line, which is 267-521-1544.
Also on IG as well, African_Independence Day on Instagram, African_Independence Day.
All right, we'll see you all next week for another edition of the Sonic Ngoma. Peace. One love.
Black power, family. Black power.
BB Toomey, BB48, Black Power, race first.
Peace.
Yeah. Now we gonna tell them that in front. We tell them like this, yo. I'm an African. I'm a African. I'm an African. I'm a African. Yeah, y'all like that? No more. This man's mind is open. I'm an African. I'm a African. I'm an African. I'm a. Let's get
And
back
that
to
motive
the
is best developed by recognizing the common enemy.